Dana 20 was used from 1972 to 1979 in the CJs. They all use this variation of the same shift linkage. The only difference, depending on the transmission, is the length of the shift tube and the linkage, length of the linkage from the shift lever to the bell crank. The other one would be the length from the bottom of the bell crank back to the shift rails. In the main, usually you do not have to replace this bottom link. Oddly enough, I don't ever recall seeing excessive wear in these two in most cases. Sometimes it's there, most times not. So we're going to concentrate on the shift bracket, the bell crank and pin, and the linkage. Shift lever bracket, bell crank, and the bell crank stud. So what we have is wear in a variety of places. The top end where your linkage goes in is sloppy. That's not tight shifting. So this gets bored, drilled to 1/2 inch, and use a 1/2 by 3/8 1/4 inch in length brass bushing. Goes in the bottom of the stick, in the bell crank, and in the top of your shift bracket on the outside, because this side is threaded. So when this is all together, you've got bushings that get everything tightened up, and you're eliminating slack. Name of the game. Key component that I first started out with several years ago, 15, 20 years ago, is the linkage from the stick to the bell crank to replace the original, which I have seen them wear enough where this ball stud will pop out. You ain't going to be around long enough for that to pop out. Heim type rod ends, 3/8 24 threads, piece of B7 threaded rod. All thread. B7 would be a grade 8 equivalent in a 3/8 24. And this is an original new old stock shift bracket, shift lever bracket, which I keep for measurement and checking purposes. The factory bracket like this with the stud, with the wear that they've got on them, if you want to change that stud, a flap disc on your grinder, just clean this off, get it rounded. You can do it with a flap disc, and when it's down there and you start seeing that little circle, take a hammer and a punch, knock the stud out. Once the stud's out, take the new stud, slide it right in the hole, put your piece of pipe on there, drive it down till it's sticking out completely. Weld it on the back side. You'll have that much sticking out to get a good weld going. Then you've got a new stud, proper size for your bushings. These are the bushings that replace the original oil light bushings. They go inside the bell crank. Now, for a quick repair, not a long-term repair, but a quick repair, these bushings are available from Barney's Jeep Parts in Ohio and from Vintage Jeep Parts in Beasley, Texas. These two go on the pin. These two go inside the shift lever. This sleeve, which is I'm having made now, this sleeve with those brass bushings wears on the ends. and you get slack. In the original configuration, your bolt that goes through goes in there and your bolt moves. The new sleeves are going to be a little tighter so that you don't have all that slop in the bolt. Alright, so you've got your pin driven in, welded up. You've drilled a hole to a 1/2 inch on your bell crank, and you're ready to assemble. Gonna have to get the dimensions, but there's a washer, without getting into the big flat washer that goes in and hits that shoulder. You can tighten everything down without binding the bell crank. Always use a top lock nut or a nylock. Either one will work fine. I happen to have a box full of top locks. So that gets your bell crank installed. With the new bushings, you've got grease fitting on the bell crank and on the shift lever. You can leave them in there, take them out, put a plug that's made for that. The new bushings don't need grease. Nobody ever greases the original stuff anyway. Outside of the fact, if you put grease in it, you get off-road and you get sand in there, now you've got grinding compound and it really wears out. So the grease fitting is optional. The bushings do not need grease. Early style stick, 72 to 75. Once you drill your hole and you've got your 1/2 inch OD, 3/8 ID, 1/4 inch length bushing pushed in, you're ready to start assembling. I'm going to show you using Matt's shift lever, putting the bushings in. Your large bushing, generally you can push it in by hand. Sometimes you need to take a brush and clean up the inside of that. Push that baby. Your bushing is in. Next, your sleeve. Sleeve goes in. Put your stick in place. I use a longer bolt over the length of the factory bolt because in an effort to keep everything tight, you run that down, tighten it up, and now you begin pulling these two together and bind your stick. Instead of that, run this down snug, put a top lock nut on it. Then you can bring this down, snug this against the bracket. You're not over tightening anything. The stick remains nice and rotates without any binding. Putting your linkage on. Take your linkage. You got your washer, got your bushing, get it lined up there. Push that all together, put a washer out here, and again, a top lock nut. Because that means you just got one nut to fool with instead of a washer and a nut. Tighten that down, and when that's tight, you got no slack there. On your stick, you drilled it and used this bushing. Same procedure. Bushing goes, washer goes on. I know how to do that really. Tighten that top lock up. Now you've got linkage. Everything works smooth. It's clear. Slack is going away. Name of the game. My newest, well, almost newest piece. Shift knobs for all of the Jeep transmissions, from the T90s up through the Dana 300 and the T5. These shift knobs are the 2.03 OD that the factory knob is. It's a made in the USA knob. Brass inserts, and the threads are all the way down to the bottom, as opposed to the factory, which was slightly recessed, which only makes a difference on the T150. The pattern is engraved and then backfilled with white paint. The jam nut is stainless steel, black oxide finish. Still need to clean those threads up a little bit, Matt. So, instead of the silk screen pattern, you do the factory pattern. T150, shift knob with the pattern. Again, all the knobs are this diameter. All of them have the brass insert, correct threads for the various versions. The 3 speeds are a 5/16 24. That's T150s, T15s, 14s, T86s, and T90s. The Dana 20 is a 3/8 24. The V6 version, single lever transfer on the V6's 71 and back. If I remember right, 2 high and 4 high are reversed. Same knob, same pattern. 80 to 86, the uses a 3/8 16. I've got them for the SR4s, T4s, T170 series, and the T5s, and the Dana 300. And they all look like this, with the correct pattern, of course. Those are all available through Vintage Jeep Parts in Texas and Barney's in Waverly. This is a T18 late pattern, reverse to the rear. The early T18s, 75 or so and older, reverse is up here. Have that pattern also, with the 3/8 24 thread, brass insert. All knobs, brass inserts, 2.03 diameter, made in the US, and they all come with a stainless steel black oxide jam nut. Okay, so now you know how to solve all the problems you have, well, at least with the loose transfer linkage. This is the prototype stage. Right now I'm shooting for early to midsummer to have the kits available. Keep an eye on Matt's channel, and he will let you know when they're available. And the distributors will be the same usual suspects. Barney's Jeep Parts, Vintage Jeep Parts, Salvage Jeep Parts in Statesboro, Georgia, MidWest Willy's in Port Orange, Florida, will be the primary retailers. Keep in touch and shift better.